Good morning, recording. There we go. Maybe we should, like, would you help me with this? I like the exact middle. Just sort of that way. So it doesn't look like I'm standing in front of it.
And you're still on. Roy's here.
Hello, Roy.
Yeah.
Well, you know, the password is. It's on, I can't see it. So I don't know what it is.
Very good.
Yes, we do.
A few things that I gotta take care of. But I'll see if I can pop in, because I would like to. Y'all set then? Everybody good?
I think somebody just got Roy.
Okay.
Roy, can you hear us? Oh, he's connecting audio now, so.
Maybe he's not there yet. That's not there.
Thank you.
There you go.
This is your last class.
I know. Until next time. This man keeps threatening me that eventually he's gonna have me do a bigger real thing.
Bigger real thing?
Yes. Well, at one point he said 3 months, and this ended up 3 weeks, so.
Well, we don't have anything. I was gonna put together a thing that we're doing for the next several months. And also my phone told me, you need to get to a concert last night. It was a good concert. It was yeah, it's in the old church in Paris. It was a folk singer. He's had like 17 CDs. He's on all these projects with the Library of Congress and stuff. Wow.
I haven't gotten into the messaging yet, but I'm planning on doing that
Okay,
tomorrow.
okay.
Although, I wonder if you want to coordinate, but is it Walter?
Walter.
Okay, you said Water.
That's okay.
Yeah,
I'm sure. Sometimes I write his name, last name is Hyde. You go the other way around.
we could put one together.
Yeah.
But I
Take 2.
think we gotta do it pretty quick.
Yeah.
2.
I think Tuesday.
We don't have very many people here so far, so take 2.
So maybe I'm wrong.
That's fine. Take another one.
Need to take 2.
Yeah. Have to find that.
All right,
You're on next time.
take 2.
What's that?
You're on next time.
Yeah. 18th to 25th.
Well, what are they doing?
Yeah.
You'll walk.
Very good.
On the 18th.
Well, I mean, you'll walk.
Oh, is she very sick or a little bit sick?
But somebody's in here.
Not yet. You-
Bruce cup coffee. Warm. That's why. Don't wander away from it. Yeah, I might disappear.
All right.
I find a new road.
Take 2.
You consider Saint Mystic? Mystic?
Take 2. Very good.
Got something to do with spiritual.
Wow. This is interesting.
Oh my God.
He's got 4 of them. You need to get 4.
All right, welcome. Somebody's gonna have to show me. You mind sharing the
He got 4, so he can.
No, he didn't.
Yeah, he did. He's got 4.
She gave it to.
He said he
I was
wanted.
gonna give it to Bruce, but she.
Oh, did Bruce for the two? Oh. No, give me two. Give me two. That's one. That's two. Right.
Oh, here's. Yeah, that is true.
We also have.
And I check my phone to see who's not getting on. Oh.
I'll pick one of them.
Good question.
The message.
Yes, I. What's going on?
Just like that. Welcome to mysticism.
Well, it's spiritual.
Well, it was. This is a free time thing on spirituality. Of which today is more focused sort of on mysticism, but only sort of. I went through the list that you have in front of you, the chronological list. These are just the Christian mystics. And it's not even a comprehensive list. It's take a time thing, and some of you share one of your sheets with one of your cards.
Yeah. And then I'll
Yeah,
share.
take that and one of the sheets, one of the cards.
Oh, then mine would be-
There you go. Everybody has one.
Someone's trying to get up.
Yeah, but okay, in case somebody else comes, thank you. So what I did was I went to one source. There are obviously lots of lists. And looked up just some Christian mystics as a place to start. And at one point, I was going to give you each a 3-minute thing on, and then I decided, no, that just doesn't work. We're going to, when I thought about picking just a few of my favorite mystics, and I decided if we had a lot more time to do this, that would be great fun. But it was just going to end up confusing, and yeah, it wasn't going to work. And then I decided, well, let's see what we can do. So, with the exception of, if you would glance down the column, the date column, to the 14th century, you will notice that he's actually, Gregory of Palamas is actually out of line, because when the computer put them all in order, 14th century doesn't start at the end of the 1400s. It starts at the end of the 1300s, which I know, but the computer didn't. So move Gregory of Palamas up by Meister Eckhart and Julian of Norwich. A lot of these dates also are circa sort of ish, we think approximately. Yeah. We don't necessarily count on sites. But you'll notice that we go from Augustine to all of a sudden, 600 years later. This does not mean that nobody was doing mystical things in the meantime. Obviously, it means we don't have records.
There were a lot of them. They just hung out in their caves and didn't write it.
Well, this is Muhammad starts off with a vision of himself on a sacred horse, on a flying sacred horse, and he goes to Mecca and he goes to Medina, and it is from Medina that he actually goes up to heaven. comes back down. That obviously is a vision. Now, when we talk about mystics, a lot of times we tend to think of somebody like Hildegard of Bingen. Get a sheet of paper and here's one, somebody give them another one. Plain is giving, plain or somebody that we need a card.
Who's gonna give you?
There's a sheet of paper and a card.
A lot of times when we think of mysticism, we tend to think of somebody like Hildegard of Bingen, who has these ecstatic visions, similar to Ezekiel, where, you know, you have a wheel within a wheel, or you have this vision of God in great glory with all sorts of angels. When you see Hildegard of Bingen, she is also often pictured with these rays coming down at her. Yeah, somebody, I was ready to describe them looking like a squid. That's not very religious, obviously. But these rays of black stuff coming down at her because there's this glorious vision. Or you end up with somebody who has visions of the Virgin Mary. That type of ecstasy is one type of mysticism. But it is only one type. Do you need a card? You haven't? Okay. There are also mystics who are much more grounded in this earth. For example, Michael Meister Eckhart and St. Francis of Assisi. You know, Francis is all about eating with the lepers, trying to start an organization here that will be very grounded in how to help the poorest of the poor, people like the lepers who aren't allowed to eat with anybody else, aren't allowed to live with anybody else, that type of thing. Francis does have an ecstatic vision. God says to him, "Fix my house." So he very carefully dashes out and fixes up the local church, which was falling apart. And God said, no, you totally blew it. Go out and fix things. You have to go fix basically the world. And Francis says, oh. So he starts this group, the Franciscans, who go all over the world. They had to modify themselves. One of the early examples is the fact that the Franciscans were supposed to own no shoes. They were supposed to have only one robe. They were not supposed to carry any food. You know, they were strictly supposed to depend on the local people. They got to England, and they didn't have shoes, and they froze to death the first winter. That doesn't work. So they had to modify, even though God told them not to. And how do you do this ecstasy versus being grounded in this world? Because they can be two very different things. You'll notice we have a lot in the 9th, 10th, 11th, etc. centuries, and you get up to Gertrude Moore and John Norton, and suddenly there's this massive shift again, and we end up not until the turn of the century there, Evelyn Underhill, and then Thomas Merton, who is interesting because he is very, very, very grounded in today. He did look at the other types of mysticism around the world, Hindu, Buddhist, pick your thing. But very, very much today. Now, I would suggest that to the extent that we have people today who announce to the world that they are seeing angels, and if somebody, in all honesty, came up to you and said, I was talking to the Virgin Mary this morning, and while we were talking, a host of angels appeared beside her.
That's when the mental health committee comes.
We have prophets among us today, and we would medicate them. I had a client when I was in Saguaro down in the 70s who told me very firmly that he had talked to the Virgin Mary at the post office that day. And when the psychiatrist finally came down to Albuquerque, he told the psychiatrist, asked him, "Do you ever see mentions of people that you know aren't here?" And he said, "No." And later on, I went to him and I said, "Dude, you told me you saw the Virgin Mary." And he said, "Well, that's because she was there." And he was very sincere. He was not trying to be flip. To him, the Virgin Mary was in the post office and talking to him. Is he a mystic? Is he schizophrenic? Is it possible to be both? And that's just a possibility I'm throwing out there. I don't pretend to have the answer. It is well known in the medical community that if you have a tumor or specific kinds of lesions in the temporal lobe, you are more likely to have religious, ecstatic language and visions. And so I had somebody once say to me, "Well, that proves that there aren't any real mystics. They are all just people with temporal lobe problems." Flip side, you are a God of creation. You are a God who has created the universe. If you want to communicate with a specific species, whatever, of animals on one particular planet, why not give them a temporal lobe that can receive you better? If you know these dudes are going to be so much eventually into making things and being very concrete, going into math, et cetera, and you want them to receive you, to be able to talk to you, maybe you give them a temporal lobe that can do that. I obviously don't have the answers. I'm not God. Yes.
I don't have answers, but I have to ask a question.
Go for it.
My opinion on my question.
Please, please.
To be bottom line, and then you covered this in the beginning when I was in the shop paper and so on. But my thought is, well, what is a mystic? And then my other thought is, well, I think we all in this room search for God's will in our life. So I think we are all mystics at certain times. And the gentleman that might have seen somebody who wasn't virgin in post office, it could have been this nice, like the saintly type person that was just being very gracious to him. And to him, that's the Blessed Virgin Mary. So I'm saying, yes, we have a list of people here that have these mystical experiences, but rather than follow them, I follow Christ and I follow what I feel might be hopefully the will of God in my life. So I don't understand maybe what you're saying about mystics. Maybe. Well, probably.
Anybody want to answer? Right.
Yeah.
All right, that's fair. This list is a list of people who have so centered their lives around, this is Christian, well, Christian, okay? Who have so centered their lives around the Christian God, Jesus, people like that, that they have seemed to some people to have experiences that are totally out of touch with this mundane world. They also are people who are so out of touch with this mundane world that it doesn't bother them. Francis of Assisi went and lived with the lepers. Ain't nobody else except that dude on the island of Hawaii, you know, that intentionally go and live with lepers. But he trusted God. It wasn't even a trust, it was beyond trust. Mysticism, the feeling of mysticism. I was talking to Gretchen about this, my 36-year-old daughter, who, by the way, in case anyone who care, identifies with Buddhism. And Gretchen was talking about the fact that my 5-year-old grandson really loves doing somersaults and somersaults and somersaults. And I mean, he could just, if there were a world somersault team, this, and it makes me dizzy just to watch him.
Is this Otto?
Yes. You may have noticed sitting up on the steps in the sanctuary, calmness and sitting still is not his forte. If he could do somersaults down those steps, he would do it. But there's this sense for him of being in a way that you aren't when you're sitting still on the steps listening to us. And it's not, well, for him, he's 5 years old, I don't know. For adults, it's a way of getting past being. Now, yes, the whirling dervishes, who are real. A dervish is a type of Sufi who, even more so than the regular Sufis, renounce any property, they don't own anything. And then the whirling is a way of getting a religious ecstasy. And every religious tradition, every religious tradition has some way of inducing that kind of trance. The mystics don't have to do that. They can get there without doing the mezcal, without doing the prayer for 28 hours on your knees on a stone floor or in a building that hasn't been heated. They just sort of are.
Lead and guide the rest of us. There's an example so that we can strive to be like them, which I want to do. I don't. I'm not getting-
We're talking about windows. The purpose of talking about mysticism, that was part of my problem. When I started thinking about just doing lecture about this, I didn't want to do this quite that much. Lecturing about mysticism is sort of the same way I always felt about lecturing about music. You should shut up and listen to the music, you know, or lecturing about art. Notice the use of the red says it going into the. Shut up and look at the pictures. What are the pictures about? Now, do these mystics talk to people? Yes, absolutely. Most of them end up with a group that follows them by choice. You know, the Franciscans, I understand going back to him, but I can't do the whole list. The Franciscans start because people wanted to be with him, and then they have traveled all over the world because people want to join. So, are they an example? Absolutely. Now, what I'd like to do in the car with the cards, Rumi is Islam, Muslim. And I did that on purpose because I was trying to get us to stretch beyond Christianity. It is very easy to say, oh, gee, I saw Jesus. Oh, gee, I saw the Virgin Mary. Yep, God angels. Rumi is Muslim. He is from the 13th century. So, you know, you've got a ways away. But he is somebody who is very much in his readings, in his writings, alive today. And each of you has at least one card, some of you two, with sayings by Rumi. Now, what I'd like to do is, I think we have time. What I'd like to do is have each of you read one of your cards. And then we will sit in silence and let those words come into you. And then we'll do another one. None of these are religious. You know, you don't have to talk about Muhammad. You don't have to talk about the visitation. You don't have to talk about the Quran. These are ways Rumi saw Allah, which is the same thing as God. Allah is simply the Arabic word, just like you could say Dios or Der God, or, you know, pick your language. They all have a different word for God. Rumi is talking about how God works in our lives and how we are, as people of God, which is exactly what you were talking about, except from a Muslim perspective. Okay? So I want, and like I said, none of these are religious. Any of these could come from a Christian mystic. They just happen not to. So who would like to read first? And yes, I will time us, not because I hate you, but just so that we really do 2 minutes. If we run out of time later, I'll go without 2 minutes. But I'd like, we do technically have half an hour left. 8:36. What if we say a minute? That'll work. Who would like to go first? Go for it.
Why do you stay in prison when the door is so wide open?
Make you feel safe. Isn't this what you know? One second. All right. Okay. Like you guys. Okay.
Do not feel lonely. The entire universe is inside you.
Go fly horse. Okay. Next.
You are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in the drop.
I'm sorry.
Read. Anything you lose comes round in another form.
Set your life on fire. Seek those and your.
There are 1,000 ways to kiss the ground. There are 1,000 ways to go home again.
I have gone through so much in the Indian part.
About between open home, but.
Problems that all baby trusted. For the water, it's never been provided.
I'm aware of the rear of the experience, not stupid. We tend to like to talk about things verbally. So if you would like, spend the next few minutes debriefing and talking about this, we can. You would rather go on for a more outfit? Do that. Preferences?
Well, if you're. Values. It should be universe. You're. Body in the universe.
The universe is out there. As opposed to. The universe is inside.
Thinking back to the conversation we had, you brought up about medical kind of routines. The point are the, these visits, these people are good, so self-actualized, because all of those needs haven't been met. So they don't have to, or need to relate to the world the way we do, because those needs have been met. So then they have more free attention or to be aware of other realities and reality. I mean, like, if somebody says, like, it's back to post office, so they're married, it's like, okay, how do you say? It's important. But somehow, in his way of seeing the world, he's maybe saw something that characterizes the goodness that the Virgin Mary symbolized. But he can only articulate it by saying, I saw the Virgin Mary, or I saw it, I'm without language. Not necessarily that someone has a mental issue. I mean, I like that idea, temporal tumor being God's booty.
Never read that part of it anywhere, so, you don't have to. Maybe that's my contribution to the system.
Might have sounded offensive earlier. I wasn't. I love the mystics. I read the mystics. I've heard podcasts by the mystics coming about or whatever. I just am not a mystic. And so I say what I can, like you're saying about the ocean or about self-actualization or about like finding, the water and the fire. And I hold those two times in my imagination because I don't live in that kind of world. I live in a world that has people and wants to be all that stuff, and they seem to be like other worlds. And I think that's me, but it's not who I am. But it's a good thing to learn from.
Where would we be if everyone was a mystic? Nobody would be eating.
Brad, right, there we go.
Most of the people on this list ended up with groups around them that supported them. They started out doing fine, like you said, renounced all of that, renounced the bottom part of the pyramids. I'm just going to live up here and self-actualize. But they had other people support. Absolutely.
So did they have a it wasn't a prophetic.
No.
It was something else.
Right. Yeah. So these are not prophet. There is a difference. Right. Yeah. Very good point. Well, that's why it occurred to me we might want some time to debrief. Because if I just sent you out with this stuff in your head. And I want to assure all of you I sounded a bit cavalier about why they're not Christians. Obviously, I like Christianity, here I am, you know, until all sorts of other things intervened, I was on the path to becoming a Presbyterian minister. Yeah, this is where I am grounded. But I've also done a lot of both reading and experiencing of other faiths. And I tend to resonate with the parts that are similar. Which is not to say, I think it's very easy for Christians to, and Muslims and Jews to say, well, you know, there are the 10 Commandments and the 613, which is the rest of them, that tell us how to live. And God always cares about how we live and all that, how we treat each other. Their religions, where their gods don't give a flip how you treat other people. The point is how you treat the God. And if you don't treat the God right, then you're going to have an earthquake or a massive volcano or something like that that wipes you out. And it's a fear-based thing rather than a love-based one. Which I bring up just so that you know that not everybody is like our tradition, which I think you are. And you've heard stories of things like the Aztecs ripping out people's hearts on the altar. Yeah, they had to. Because the end of the world was coming up. There are cycles, and you have to keep the wheel going. You know, it's like any of the wheels that are the ones that bring the energy. As it approaches the top again, you have to give it a kick and get it to go again. And the massive sacrifices were to keep that wheel going.
A lot of the pagan gods were positive things. I mean, they had both.
Right?
And they had fertility and gods of love.
Yeah.
So it wasn't all
Oh,
fear-based.
oh, no. I'm just saying they do exist.
But Christianity can be fear-based.
How so?
Oh, yeah.
Sometimes they use it as dinner. And straight down there's a hot place.
Heaven and hell.
Right.
Burning in the fire, the lake of fire.
Well, if the ocean is in you, if the universe is in you, what kind of responsibility does that give? I mean, it can be. Okay, I've been studying this stuff all my life, and it's still hard to articulate. It's that whole word thing gets in the way. If the universe is in you, it's like what I have also expressed. Every single atom in the universe at some point goes around and goes to someplace else. I mean, you know, I am hitting the table, right? And some of the atoms in my hand are going into the table. And some of the atoms in the table are going into my hand. And I'm not talking bruises. I'm talking at the molecular level, at the atomic level, at the subatomic level, where they're sharing quarks. That happens. The universe is in me. As well as I'm in the universe. Someday somebody's gonna burn this table and it's all gonna go up in the air and it's all gonna be dispersed and, you know, assuming the ozone layer lets it through, it's gonna be out there.
So we got 1 million neutrinos going through our body and what's it?
Yeah. Yes, and how does that? How does that?
He's got a lot more work.
And those neutrinos may have been, you know, billions of light years away.
Yes. You are made for stardust. You really, truly, in a physical sense, are made of stardust. The universe is in. But doesn't it depend on what kind of seeds have been planted in you, so how do you act on that knowledge? I mean, like, someone would say, well, in this person can be beyond the universe. They're a megalomaniac and decide to do whatever they want. And have done. Yeah, I do. Yeah. You know. It's like, okay, so. Yeah, ooh. No. Where does it, I guess, be needed? Where does critical thinking begin to come in? You know, then ultimately, if you have been instilled in the idea that you own yourself, then how do you develop that kind of, that's not just about, even if you were citizen, that I have to announce that you represent her too. Yes. Yes, you know, but I mean, like, but I come to that conclusion because my Christian training. Somebody else's Christian training. They
It's not
belong.
only the Christian training.
No, for
I
me.
don't believe, you know, I mean, we're kind of bored with a conscience, with basic idea. The way we reproduce, I mean, you're responsible for your children, you're responsible for the people around you. And that's kind of there with everybody.
Why do you stay in prison when the door is wide open?
Interesting, a lot of these are quite related, you know, the universe, the rock, the ocean, and then why do you stay and then set your life on fire and seek those who
And
The theme that I'm noticing is that they're all first person. To your point about it, you could wrap yourself in these quotes, it's a warm blanket. We're all. Seems anti-Christian. You know, some of the quotes we read, I think, overlap with Christianity very well. But I was shocked by how many were first person.
most of them are the anti-Christian.
To me,
Okay.
wrapping myself that I'm the special star nugget. That's the end of the story. To me, isn't living out.
there was, I think Billy said it at TGI. Something about being selfish and how important it is. There's nobody but you who understands what you're doing, you know, what you're going through, and therefore you have to be responsible for taking care of it, you know. I mean, hopefully other people will help and you will help other people at the same time. But that's part of the, it's only part of it.
Well, I can agree with what you said, but what I'm saying is this living in self-actualization is selfish.
Some of these, yeah, a lot of these.
Okay, hang on, what do you say?
Over here, I'm the envy of every garden. I'm a fire. I have the universe. How does that command you to go deep?
Well, it doesn't exactly say I have the universe. It says don't feel lonely
As the universe is inside you?
because the entire universe is inside
The
you.
risk.
But it's also inside you.
Megalomania.
No, but it's also inside.
If I accept the premise.
Right, but I'm saying if you accept all of these premises, it's not just one person, it's everybody.
But doesn't that dilute it to the point of just Paul want to furnish?
It's Jensen. What kind of responsibility?
What are you trying to say?
I agree with you that these are not asking the person to recognize that these things are true of other people. These are asking the person to recognize something about themselves. And we can decide to extend that. Some Christian may decide to realize that. But these are not saying.
Except that, and I would show you, these are writings that go out to the world. So I know that Lane read. I know that you read them. And I know that you read them for you.
It's very easy writing something, it's not. You can just think it. That's enough.
So
Yeah, you could do this for an English assignment. Oh, God, I have to find for them. Here I go. You know?
and satisfaction is the fact that there. But these things are addressed specifically. Calling on us to recognize these things.
Well, for one thing, we have to remember this wasn't written by a Christian. And for another thing, I, as a Christian, took it as each one of us has each one of these things completely. And I also, when I was thinking I have the entire universe inside of me, think of the responsibility that I have with the entire universe inside of me. Now that is my perspective, not everybody's. I understand that, and I know people, or I know of people that probably would take it as I and not put it out on anybody else. But personally, when I was thinking, when we were meditating about it, was thinking the whole, each individual, not just in this room, but in the world, had each of these things. And with each of these things, we have a responsibility.
In the New Testament, there are two versions of the Beatitudes. And one version's, and it's interesting which one we read. One version says, "Blessed are the poor, for they shall inherit." And the other one says, "Blessed are the poor in spirit." One of them says, yeah, dudes, the one that's down there in the bread line, trying to go to the Rio Grande food bank to get enough food, the people who are living out of the, oh, there's a name for the one beginning with S, where they get clothing, etc.
Salvation Army?
Hmm?
Salvation Army?
Well, that one too. It isn't we used to have a box over there in the Sunday school area. You know, all those people who are living on handouts, the welfare mothers, anybody who needs to live on handouts, those are the poor. Those are the ones who are blessed. We tend to say, blessed are the poor in spirit. All those people who aren't as religious as we are. All those pagans. Anybody who's not a Christian. Very different. Very, very. So, and I won't answer.
So, but these, like, I mean, I've read the writings in their context, so. I mean, like, it feels like people who has a part in scripture on and not the context in which the scripture is in. So it's like, perhaps they'll, you know, we, like the one about the universe being inside us, Well, then maybe the very next one talks about how the universe is in everyone. So I mean, like, is that the context of these holidays?
The part of Rumi that I've read, and frankly, it gets kind of thick. They are more aphorisms, cover things, than they are stories. You know, he doesn't do. Once upon a time, there was a farmer who had 12 seeds and the way Jesus. These are more single things, more like the prophets. If you've ever actually read, you know, Amos or any of those guys at the end, they pretty much are, if you do this, that's it, end of discussion. Now we're going to go on to the next. Or Ecclesiastes. You know, you have these separate verses in Ecclesiastes that are African. That's what they are.
These strike me as very provocative in the sense that the person writing them may not be totally certain of how they would be. You know, it's like just trying to provoke the response. So they don't strike me so much. I've thought this through. Here's my wish list for like, we provoke a thought into people. So that they can, that's how they strike me.
You notice how I try to present it to you. I just said you. And what is a mystic? A mystic is someone who is in this. They don't think it. They don't worry about how it's supposed to show up. You know, the Muslims are supposed to. Zakat is different than a tithe because it's a definite percentage on your wealth, and your wealth is more than what you need to actually live. So if you have a 4-bedroom house and there's just you and your spouse and you share a room, all the other bedrooms, those 3 bedrooms are wealth, and that's what it's taxed on. Like, it's phenomenally big. That isn't what a mystic is. Rumi is Muslim, was very good enough. He is in these. Now, just for the record, because you know me, I always do 12 other sides. One reason we do the Lord's Prayer every single Sunday, and we still do it in the King James Version. It's the only thing we still do in the King James Version, but we do, is precisely because you know it so well. You can say it without having to think about it. The same way you do when, in a few minutes, I will be getting up there and reading a scripture, and you have to hear what I'm saying, think about it, you know, all that good stuff.
What's the point in praying?
Being. Being.
That's true.
I make it a point to think.
I know you do. If you want to say 21st century, that's good.
Yeah, it is. Nice to see you again. I thought you were permanently in Seattle. Okay.
Hi. I knew.
Goodbye, Roy.
Thank you for your comment.